It's Shally. You're live on Shally's Alley. It is June 21st of 2024. It is hotter than Hades out here in Atlanta. I don't know about where you are. And no, I'm not complaining. I'm just stating a fact. Really, I've been to Hades and back, and it is hotter here than it is there, sadly. So this is our second to last episode in June. We got one more episode coming this month. Next up will be my buddy William Uranga, former head of talent at TiVo and a few other companies that you would recognize. So come back for that. In the meantime, I'd love to introduce you to my very special guest today, Aquaman. I have an actual real-life superhero on Shally's Alley, if you can believe that, right here. So for those of you that are watching, if you see a large fork on the wall there, that is not a toy. That is actually Chris's salad fork. So Cris Carver comes to us from BECU. You might recall a fellow BECUer, if that's the right word, Marvin, who was here at the end of May. Marvin's still with BECU, right?
Yeah. He is my, for the lack of a better word, boss.
Yeah, well, he was the one that put me onto you. He said you got to get Carver on the show. So I'm like, all right.
Yeah, he's such a phenomenal individual. I love working with Marvin, and his leadership is amazing. He's got such a good vision for what we're doing, and it's a pleasure listening to his episode on Shally's Alley a few weeks back.
Yeah, we go way back, man. He and I go way back to when I used to regularly travel to Seattle. I had two jobs that made me a West Coaster. Normally, I'm all about the East Side, whoop whoop, but I had two jobs. When I was at Google, I had to fly out to the Palo Alto area, Google headquarters, every other week for, I was going to say a week. Technically, it's more like a business week. So every other week, Monday through Thursday night, I would fly out there, and so it was literally 5,000 miles or whatever. And then when I went to Microsoft, I went out there for like a couple of weeks at a time, or like a week a month. So I spent quite a bit of time in Seattle there, and got to know the area and some of the sweet folks there from the Sourcing 7, I think it's called. Mm-hmm. But fun times. So BECU, am I saying that right? Is it BECU?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. It's a bank, right?
Yeah, so it's a financial or it's a community-based credit union. Was founded 80 years ago by Boeing employees, and that's where the BE comes from, is Boeing Employee Credit Union. And it's the fourth largest credit union in the nation, which is really cool because it's kind of narrowed in and whatnot into the Pacific Northwest. So being a community-based credit union in one very specific region of the United States, and having that number 4 spot in terms of members of the credit union and assets managed is pretty cool.
So I'm really good with numbers, but I absolutely suck at math.
Yeah.
And finance and money, especially terrible at money. So and I used to work at Fiserv, which is the company that runs all of the. Well, they're like Cisco to the internet. Fiserv is to money. They're the money highway in a lot of ways. And I know that they did quite a bit of work with entities that are called banks and entities that are called credit unions. So correct me if I'm wrong here, but basically the difference is BECU and credit unions are not-for-profit banks, which doesn't mean that they don't make money. Right. It just means that the proceeds or their revenue, their income is distributed to their members or shareholders rather than to some owner or whatever. So you have advantages with a credit union that are kind of, pros and cons, right? Advantages are like it's a lot less expensive because a lot of the money gets reinvested. and there's features you can get that you normally couldn't get at other banks because they cost money. And then disadvantages in that it's they're not the World Bank, right? They're not Bank of America.
Yeah.
They don't have that. So am I about right, or is there a better way to explain that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way of putting it. I think the other perk from more of an employer side of things too is that working for a credit union, you tend to be somewhere that is purpose driven. They're community based. They have a very specific agenda in mind
Right.
of a demographic or group of people that they're trying to help, as opposed to a bank that is profit driven.
Right.
So they're going to fit different personalities, but you described it very well.
There's a cause as
Mhm.
opposed to, well, there's always a cause. It's either money or, well,
Yeah,
it's also money because it's a bank, but the cause is
right.
to further the interests of the membership, right?
Mhm.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
Well, so I have to ask, I just have to ask, when I was, you and I never met, and I was introduced by a couple of people actually that said, "Y'all, you gotta talk to this guy." And I looked you up, and you've got this thing on LinkedIn that says that you are Aquaman. Now I have to say, I hope you're not actually delusional about being Aquaman. But can you explain to me how that whole thing comes up? Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
So a couple of years back, I had the opportunity to work for Mike Cohen, who's also known as Batman, and everybody that worked for him.
oh, Batman, Aquaman. So you guys
Yep,
had a team. Were you the league? What is that called? The
the
league?
Justice League.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Were you the Justice League?
we were the Justice League. So everyone was given a
Damn.
superhero alter ego. I really enjoyed mine and saw it as an opportunity to build something uniquely me. And so I chose to
Oh.
lean into it really heavily, built it into my own thing. But that's its roots. That's where it came from. And then I like the idea of being a quote unquote super sorcerer. Someone that is a
So it
superhero,
is
but
a marketing, positioning, branding thing.
absolutely, that's absolutely what it is. The best part about
Now,
it all
why
is that
Aquaman though? So what was like your? Sorry, but I'm just curious about what was your driver? Did you grow up with Aquaman comics, or did you just like water?
no, so I actually didn't pick the moniker for me. It was given to me. Just to fit that Justice League theme that Mike was running over at Wayne Technologies, and I liked it. Aquaman is a very principled individual, values his family, is quite intelligent and strategic in the way that he approaches things. And I was like, what, I think I can stick with this. This makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So it fit your character, and
Mhm.
please let me know if you can swim.
I can, yes.
Okay. All right.
I'm better at not sinking than I am swimming,
Me
but
too.
I
Yeah.
definitely can swim.
It is very difficult for me to not sink. Um, so before we move on to another topic here, who are some of the other members of the original, Batman, Aquaman, Wonder Woman?
Yep. We had Wonder Woman. That's Julia Adler.
Dang
We
it,
had we
it's
had
taken already. I wanted to be Wonder Woman. She was by far my favorite.
she's awesome. Yeah, she's awesome. My good friend Julia is a phenomenal person that wore that mantle well. We had Nightwing, which is a version of Robin that was employee number one, or I guess employee number two after the founding of Wayne Technology. So it made sense. The sidekick that came in and was tutored under Batman. We had Cyborg, Batgirl,
Oh,
Huntress.
Cyborg.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. We had some good ones. It was a lot of fun.
Is Superman part of this league?
Yes, but there's a weird dichotomy between Batman and Superman,
Yeah,
so that
didn't
was
Batman
intentionally
fire
avoided.
Superman or something?
Yeah, yeah. So that bridge was never crossed.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so who's the? Oh, wait, Flash, right?
Yeah, I
So
wish we had a Flash. No one was
Flash
fast
is
enough
my
at sorcery to
son's
be
favorite.
Flash.
My son and I have been watching Flash since he was little, and it's a very long series.
Hmm.
So whenever we get a chance, we catch an episode together, and it just keeps going, not in a bad way, but it's a kid show, but it's really fun. And
Yeah.
Flash definitely embodies some personality elements that are very appealing, like
Mhm.
just honesty, integrity,
Yep.
stuff like that. So cool. I get it now. I get it. And where did you get the trident?
So that was gifted to me as part of this branding that I have leaned into, and so I gladly put it up on my wall, and it stays there. It's in the background of all my Zoom calls and
It's awesome.
yeah, webinars. You know,
On the background of my Zoom call, yeah, sorry, webinars, and what were you saying?
well, podcasts such as Shally's Alley. Here we go.
Right, there you go. You can't really see it. I'm going to be redecorating. My son is going to be joining me in my office this summer, so you can't really see it. But over there, you see those 3 dolls?
Uh huh.
They're action figures,
Okay.
and they are recruiting action heroes. There's 4 in the series. I have been forever looking for the 4th one. Anybody that's out there, please, I beg you, if you know where the 4th one is, I will fly out there and I don't know. I'll do something really unexpected and good. But anyways, so you probably don't remember this, or you might not even been around. Hot Jobs.
I'm familiar with the name. That was never part of my recruiting experience.
So like, we're talking about OCC, Online Career Center, became Monster, Career Builder, Net Temps. Hot Jobs was another competitor of theirs, and they got acquired by Yahoo.
Mm-hmm.
And when Yahoo acquired them, in order just to, I don't know, just revitalize the brand and kind of assimilate it, they continued this gimmick that Hot Jobs had. The first one was let's see if I can find it, was a Hot Jobs. Yeah, they're sort of kind of stuck to the wall a little bit, but they're all mint in their package.
Oh, that is awesome.
And it's basically a recruiter, right? It's called the Super Recruiter,
Uh-huh.
fully flexible HR action figure, extra value pack, comes with a hiring booth and a lens for finding the right one.
Awesome.
It also has a briefcase that rather looks kind of like a tackle box.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. And then there's a piggy bank. I don't know why there's a piggy bank. And a magnet. I get that. Talent magnet. And of course, a power suit. She's even got a little, what do you call that? Batman wears?
Like a mask or a cowl?
Yeah. Like one of those. And there's 4 in the series. I have 3 of them, and I'm missing the 4th one. So that's kind of my prized possession that is on my wall that is somewhat related to action heroes.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested in kind of how this whole thing played out with regard to kind of the way that you source. So you started sourcing and kind of, I don't know, developed a style. Every artist has a brush stroke.
Right.
And you talk about clean search. You say you always want to have a clean search. Not something I hear a lot. I think I understand the concept, but can you explain, first of all, what is a clean search? And then why is it so important?
Yeah, so I'm going to back this up a little bit and give you my background as to why this developed, so it makes a little bit more sense, I hope.
Yeah.
Back in 2021, I felt like I knew what sourcing was. And I felt like I knew how to find people, and I learned I wasn't very good. I had attended the virtual Recruit Con where Brian Fink spoke about Boolean, and I understood the and or not. I didn't know how to use it very effectively, but I understood the fundamentals at least a little bit. And I heard him talk about the way to build a search, and I felt like my mind was blown. At the time, I was working for a property management company called Peak Living. My tech suite was LinkedIn Recruiter and Indeed resume database, and so that was my exposure. And I was trying to find a lot of people that seemed to be really hard to find on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn Recruiter didn't do me a lot of good. So I started building Boolean searches in the Indeed resume database, and I started getting people back, and I started tracking my metrics, figuring out what was working, what wasn't. And it just started making more and more sense to me. It was like word math, and converting words into variables, and then drawing out an equation to get what I wanted. And I learned that as I segmented things
in other words,
down,
logic.
Oh yeah, yes, yeah. I took a logic course in
Boolean Logic. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, I took several logic courses in my time at Southern Utah University, and that would be the way I describe it. But not a lot of people have that same background. But that's it is what it is. But I learned that being intentional about each piece of your Boolean allowed for you to drop things out or add things in a way that it was meaningful. It wasn't just a large word vomit of what was there. And so I started creating, as tools changed, and I picked up, Seek Out and Hire Easy, and the roles I started working on were findable on LinkedIn.
Folks, this is not a paid advertisement.
No, it's not. These are just tools that I've used. I learned that I could create nested statements and break things down by purpose. So I started using text editors that a lot of software developers will use.
Yep.
So that I could piece it
Okay,
out.
favorite text editor now.
My favorite is Brackets.
Okay.
There's a lot of them. Brackets is my favorite. It's free. I'm all about free. I don't like to pay for things.
Yeah.
So I started using that, and the concept of clean Boolean then was that I could clearly define what each piece of my search was doing and why it was structured the way that it is. So I started putting together fairly complex nested statements, to allow for high levels of variation that were intentional. And I could substitute bits and pieces. I could cut that out and put in a new title string, or I could cut something out in a skills section search and put that in. But it was intentional building of Boolean, and that's why I used the text brackets.
And then you discovered me and my lectures and realized that all of that is obsolete.
It depends.
Sorry. No, it doesn't depend on anything, let me tell you. So let me play this back. Nested statements for, I don't know who's listening, so at the risk of Shally explaining something, nested statements are when you have words inside of parentheses separated by an or. The nest is the parentheses. And typically you can have statements that are nested within statements that are nested. So for example, it could be apples or oranges and pie or cobbler. So those can be nested statements, right? So just explain that to people. And then the sequencing that you chunked up into blocks would be like keywords related to the skills, keywords related to the companies, keywords related to the job titles, so that they're in some sort of order that you can then sort of, pick and choose and peel apart, right?
Yep.
Okay. Go on. Just wanted to,
Yeah. No, that's a great explanation of that. And so that's kind of where this idea came from. And then I realized that there are so many people that don't have access to paid tools. And most. I found most, and I found an absolute affinity for X-ray searching, and diving into Google or Bing and just finding.
Okay, once again, X-ray searching is when you use site : and then a website. That's it. Yeah. There's no magic. It's just site : LinkedIn, site : Facebook.
Right. Yeah. And it was amazing finding software engineers and going to github.com and being able to look at the code that they're building and reach out to them on a personalized level and say, hey, I saw that you this repository in your GitHub profile looks really cool. I've got a software engineering friend that looked at it, says that it works. There's, something along those lines. What was great, or then diving into the world of individual portfolios, looking for people that front end engineers. I spend most of my time in software engineering, but front end engineers that have put together their own personal portfolios as a published website. All of a sudden they became some of the easiest people for me to find.
Because they have websites.
They have websites, and they put contact information in there. So I didn't have to pay for contact info. I didn't have to try and finagle my way to figure out what, the best way to reach them. It was all right there. So that's kind of where that affinity for X-ray search became, because I could take that clean Boolean principle of very intentional chunks of Boolean with very specific
specific sections following a logic, and then pieces that are replaceable. Change the title to get different results. Change the keyword. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so that I would say that's where my style really kind of developed itself in its entirety, was that I became this X-ray searching, loving sorcerer that just wanted to share and give people an opportunity to learn some too.
So that's the clean search, is that following that logic. Okay.
Mhm.
So pop quiz. The order of operations
Mhm.
for Boolean syntax. A lot of people get all bent out of shape about Boolean. It's so complicated, folks. There are three Boolean,
Mhm.
and really only two Boolean that you need to know about. They are and, or, not. You are now a Boolean black belt.
Yes.
Very simple. However, most of the time in most databases, modern databases, you don't need to use and because it's
Mhm.
implied. So if you put word
Space.
one, word two, that means this word and that word. So the only ones you really need are the or, which is frequently what you put in nested statements, and the minus or the not to remove results.
Mhm.
So in the order of operations, what keywords get solved first?
So if you're using parentheses and quotations, that's where your order of operations starts to get complex. Everything within a set of parentheses is solved for first,
In which
um,
order?
left to right.
That's right.
Right. And so the way that I try and teach this and communicate this is that if you learned algebra and you learned the acronym PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, right? Think parentheses first, translate your exponents to your quotations, because that's going to create a single search term, and then left to right for everything. And so it's going to solve for the innermost parentheses, create a true value out of that. Next set of parentheses, create a true value out of that, and then it's going to read it from left to right, and you're going to have the search that you built. And that's why I like nested statements, is because I can create multiple true scenarios um, that allow for that intentional variation.
Alternatives
Hmm.
or synonymous. Yeah. So there's one exception to that, and that is if you happen to reach the limit.
Yes.
Most of the time, you won't. And if you're going to use this kind of search logic, it's a good idea to shoot for about 8 to 12 uh, search terms
Hmm.
or I don't know, statements, right? Much more than that, and you're running the risk of overcomplicating it. Simple is always going to be complex. But if you do have because you have to have longer ones, you can run into a limit where the search engine will ignore certain things on the right.
Hmm.
So in those cases, when you're not sure if you're going to reach the limit, reverse the logic.
Hmm.
If you have 8 to 12, then most important term goes to the left. The must have, the requirements go to the left.
Yep.
Then your nested statements, then your nots, left to right. But if you think it's going to be long, take the ones from the end and put them at the left.
Hmm.
Because what will happen is then if it gets truncated, the search engine will tell you where it got cut off,
Hmm.
and you'll know which ones got left out. And if those are the most important ones, you need to remove things on the left to make room for the ones on the right. It's an
Right.
exception, but it's the only time that that follows.
Yeah.
So if that's the order of operations, do you recommend starting with a broader search or a narrower search? This is kind of a debate, right? Do you go
Yeah.
wide or you go narrow from the first search?
Um, I think it depends on where I'm at in the search. But if we're talking the first search, I've
New,
now
right?
had
First
my
time.
my
Yep.
yeah, I've had my meeting with my hiring manager. I know what they're looking for. I say start as narrow as I can, is my preference. And then build out from there. My reasoning for that is they've got their laundry list or ideal candidate of what that looks like, and the more specific I can get there, the better. However, my caveat to that is that if they have such a laundry list of candidates, or of skills that they're looking for in this candidate, then I start broad and work in. Because I want to see what truly is the must have or the nice to have there. But my general strategy is start narrow and then expand. But either way, as long as you're iterating on the search, I don't think there's necessarily a wrong way to do it. Um, with that caveat of, are you iterating on your searches? Because if you're not, then you're doing it wrong to begin with, and the searches are never one and done.
Right. Ooh, wow, that's great. I was just about to ask you that next question. Is it possible? Because I get asked this a lot. 28 years of doing this, I've advised, I don't know, probably hundreds of thousands of recruiters and
Mhm.
sourcers and, trained them all over the world. At least 300 organizations that have brought me on board to, teach them how to do it. And I always, I cannot think of a single example of a time that I was in front of a group of recruiters where this question didn't get asked. And the question is, what is the best search?
There's not one.
And it's like, you know, uh, you can never have a search that you apply one time and it's like
Mhm.
boom. Even I still don't do that.
Yeah.
I don't really even go for it, but I will tell you that I have fundamental building blocks that I start
Mhm.
with. Like, for example, you're talking about the X-ray, which is site colon. So that's a technique or a field search command
Yeah.
that is frequently used. And
Mhm.
then you add stuff to it. So I have some go-to things, but there's several of them, not one. And there's never going to be, even if you've been doing the same search over and over and over. And case in point, I was looking I was working at this company where all they hired were Golang developers.
Okay.
And for 2 years, right, I led an entire team of sourcers and I supported an entire team of recruiters. And this was like their number one repetitively requested, skill on a requisition. And I, to the very last day, continued to discover new ways of saying Golang developer in searches. Like
Yeah.
just you can't just do it one time. So there's never a silver bullet. There's never would you call it a one hit or a one off?
Yeah. A one off.
A one off. Yeah, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this. This is a question I don't get asked very often, and I wish I did. When do you, Aquaman,
Mhm.
know to stop?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my current strategy that I operate under the guidance of Marvin and ways that I've been taught is that we build out these campaigns, of potential prospects that we want
Oh,
to
wait,
turn
wait,
into
wait. No, sorry.
candidates.
Back up. Before
Uh-huh.
you go all the way, I don't want, we can talk about that, but I'm talking about when you're doing a search. So you started
Mhm.
broad or you started narrow, depending
Okay.
on, but so you started broad and then you narrowed it, or you started narrow and then you broadened it. When, when do you stop iterating? All right. When do you, all right, I'm going to try this, change that. I'm going to try this,
Gotcha.
change that. I'm going to try this. When do you stop doing that and actually start digging into the results for that one search? Then we
Yeah.
can talk about the other one.
Okay, okay. So as I'm building searches and I'm iterating, I'm generally looking at about the top 25 to 50 results, depending on the scope of the search, right?
Okay.
So I look at about the top 25 to 50, and I kind of weigh my results of, if at least 75% of those are hitting the mark, then I know I can stop iterating, and that and I, I iterate, and the reason I start narrow is I hope to start really high, and then I broaden because my goal is to get roughly between 150 to 200 people that I can drop into a messaging campaign, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
Right, and so if I've run my search, I've got my narrow results, and I've got through them, and it makes sense, and then I'm broadening my results. What I'm wanting to see is about 75 to 80% of the profiles I'm looking at appear to be qualified, well qualified individuals for what I'm looking at. If they're not hitting that in that first 25 to 50 spot, then it's time to iterate. Something was wrong, and I got to figure out what was the common denominator that
Keep
was
tweaking.
missing.
Right.
Mhm. But that's my general strategy of when to stop iterating. Is that now I've run several searches and I'm hitting 75+% of
And
those.
then you start digging in. Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's when I really start digging in to figure out
Right.
who's the most qualified and who makes the most sense.
Obviously, you're extremely intelligent guy. So let me break this down a little bit for folks that are new to this, because sometimes when we sit in the chair, we forget about other people who haven't sat in the chair. Right.
Mhm.
Um, my my way is you hit it dead on, but I just kind of want to break it down a little bit.
Sure.
I look at the first 10 results and just the first 10 results.
Okay.
And I don't click on anything. Okay. I just look at the 10 results, whatever it is, whether it's LinkedIn, your
Mm-hmm.
ATS, whatever search it is. I look at the first 10 results. And in my mind, I mentally count which ones I would click on if I were to do the search. Like if I were to execute this search and begin my sourcing, I mentally go, okay, keep, don't keep. And what I'm looking for is just, is this something I would click on? I don't click on it, but would I click on it?
Mm-hmm.
Even if I'm not really sure. So I could be uncertain, or I could be like,
Yeah.
that may lead to something or not, but I include it. And what I'm looking for is if 5 out of the 10 are no's, then I blitz it. I'm like, that's not good. I need to
Yeah.
rejig, reset, right?
Mm-hmm.
My target is 7 or 8, which you said 75%. That's literally
Yeah.
right between those two. So if I'm looking at the first 10 and I go yes to 7 of them, I'm good. If I go yes to 8 of them, I'm really confident.
Mm-hmm.
I don't ever try to get 10. It's likely impossible, but even if you do it, you're more than likely leaving too many things on the table. So 7 to 8 is, 7 is good, 8 is great, 9 is excellent, but you're starting to push the limit on, you
Mm-hmm.
may be leaving some things behind. 6, tweak it a little bit. Even with 7, you can tweak a little bit. 5, it's may not be worth tweaking. You might want to just kind of scrap it and think differently,
Mm-hmm.
unless you keep getting 5s and then you have no choice. But really, that's what I'm looking at. So
Yeah.
I just kind of go out of the first 10, I just go yes, 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 no, no, yes, no, no, yes, nah, next, and tweak it like
Mm-hmm.
that. And then I know that I've got, when I get to that 8, I've got a search that's worth actually clicking on things.
Yeah.
And then I do my second pass. Now I click on them and see if they're actually things I want to keep.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And then I do it. Yeah, that's so. Now I want to go back to what you were saying before. So the way I think you interpreted the question was, when do you know how to stop sourcing? Which actually is a really good question. So you just did all your sourcing and you made a list. How big is the list, or
So
how much longer do you source by hours, by day? Like, do you have okay, I'm going to source for 10 hours, or I'm going to source until I find X amount of leads? What's your stopping point?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'd say that's a twofold question. For really niche and hard to fill roles, my goal is to get as close to 150 people as possible. But I've got SLAs I've got to meet as a sourcer at BECU. So if I've worked on that role for 3 or 4 solid days and I'm at 120 or 100 people, and it's I've run 7, 8, 9 searches that feel really good, well built. I've sought feedback. At that point, I'll stop and I'll say, okay, these are the 100 and change that I'm going to message. On the flip side, for roles that are less niche, some of my more standard software engineering roles, even architect roles, what I'm looking at is ending somewhere between about that 175 to 215, 225 range. By the end of 3 days or sooner, if I can get to that point. So if I get to that point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sourcing. Even if I've got a backlog of people that are still from my searches, I'm going to stop looking at the profiles to determine who I need to message. I'm going to start there, and I'm going to run my campaign. I'll start talking to the people, engaging with them. Those that are qualified and interested that I've now had a phone screen, I'll push through the system. And I put a little note on those that were sourced, but their profiles weren't fully examined yet, as I'm going to come back to these. This is my pipeline of people that I can continue to look at that were in the same wheelhouse as these first batch of people that I messaged, so that after I've had those engagements with my recruiter and my hiring manager, if we're off base, I can go right back to that pipeline and cruise through it. I've got the sourcing legwork done, and I can figure out with that refinement, if needed, what was missed on the first time. Was there something we need to give a higher priority to that we didn't in the first time? Things along those lines. So yeah, it's kind of a twofold question of, is it a niche role or is it not a niche role? And at that point, what is your service level agreement with your hiring teams or your organization of how quickly are you working on a role to introducing qualified candidates, and do you genuinely feel good about the work that you've done? Because it would be really easy to get to 200 people and be like, yeah, you know what, people weed themselves out. They'll say that they're not interested or the role doesn't match. Well, I'm not okay with that. That's low quality sourcing. I want to make sure that I'm putting my best forward.
Okay. So I'm hearing two approaches.
Mm-hmm.
One approach is, and this is going to change based on your industry, your SLA,
Right. Mm-hmm.
your company. You probably want to start out by understanding how many people need to interview in order to get a hire, how many people need to be submitted in order to get an interview. Mm-hmm. But eventually you'll arrive at some figure, let's say. So methodology number one for knowing when to stop sourcing would be to reach a certain numerical goal, be it, let's say, 50 leads or 200 leads, and then you can stop and go on to whatever, outreach phase or submittal or whatever, right? So some number like 50 or 200.
Yeah, and we always get to those numbers by working backwards, right?
Right,
Saying
right.
like,
But there's a number goal. Like I
yeah.
am going to, me, Shally, I am going to source for 50 names, and that's my goal. And then when I get to 50, I stop. The other one is I'm hearing you do perhaps smaller batches and get them in the process, and then go back and do smaller batches and get them in the process, and go back and do smaller batches and keep going that way. However, I feel like that could easily lead into a not knowing when to stop situation, or stopping too late, in that the people in your first or second batch are starting to make it to the interview process, and now the people in your last batch aren't getting interviews,
right,
because we're full on. And so you've wasted your time and possibly even the candidate's time. So I'm kind of hearing that you should at least have some kind of numerical objective, even if you plan on doing small batches. Am I hearing correctly?
That's the general camp that I sit in, and I think what's important to know is that I don't run batch after batch. I'll run my batch, work on a different role, and then I kind of have that debrief with the hiring team before I return to it.
But you do have a numerical goal, and so okay. So you might have a timeline as well, but but you still have to have that goal. Now, going into this a little bit deeper, out of that list of, let's say, 50, what would you consider to be an acceptable target take rate? Meaning, out of the 50, how many of those at minimum should move forward into whatever forward means? Forward means the recruiter screens them. Forward means they get approved for outreach. Forward means they get sent an email to apply. Whatever that next step is, but they move away from being an anonymous, uncontacted lead to something else. How many of those 50 is considered minimum, passable, like you're doing your job?
So that's a really good question. When I think of those numbers, I'm thinking those 50 are those that I've already qualified and I'm reaching out to. So at that point, I would say the moving forward would be, I've now reached out to them. What does that step look like? In an ideal world, as I'm sourcing, I would like to see 70% of of the people profiles I'm looking at are qualified, seemingly qualified, I should say, seemingly qualified for the role that I'm working on. So if I need 50 people at that point, I'm going to have to reach out, or I'm going to have to look at 80 profiles to get, or 70 profiles to get to my 50. On the flip side,
I was getting at. That's exactly what I was getting at.
On the flip side, for those that I'm reaching out to, once I've now moved them forward, I'm trying to engage them to become a candidate as opposed to a prospect. My goal is to hit about 35% response rate. Right. There's some debate even internally. Marvin and I have this conversation all the time, and it's a very entertaining one of, should we prioritize open rates or should we prioritize response rates? And I'm in the camp of response rates, but both you can track backwards into, well, this is what my percentages need to be able to get the amount of qualified candidates that I'm looking for. But I look for a 35% response rate. I don't care if it's a yes or a no, but I that's how I know I'm reaching out in messaging that is effective. I'm appealing to the right kind of an audience.
Target
That
audience. Yeah.
yeah. That being said, when they are a no, I don't want them to be like, hey, I'm not qualified for this job. Why are you reaching out to me? This is a
Right.
no, I'm not interested. Timing doesn't line up right
Not now,
now.
maybe later.
Yeah.
Don't like your company. I'll never work for you.
Ideally not that, but yes.
Well, I mean, if they don't like your company, they don't,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I used to recruit earlier in my career. I used to recruit when I was at Microsoft for Linux engineers, and most folks may not even realize this. There was a very hotly debated anti-Microsoft movement when open source was nascent and starting to pick up speed, and it was all like, open source, yay! Microsoft is closed source. They want to keep it to themselves. And it was like a huge debate, and so Linux was pro open source, and contacting people that were working on that and asking them to come to work for Microsoft was literally like trying to recruit Jedi to become Sith, or
Yeah.
So I would get a lot of negative requests. Now, the reason we had to do that is because Microsoft was launching the next generation of operating system, which was going to be open source.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever whether Linux won or what, I don't care. The point is we needed Linux engineers, and
Yeah.
Linux engineers like, oh no, I would never work for Microsoft. So that was tough. But I want to come back to what you were saying about the take rate more so than the open rate.
Sure.
However, and Marvin is a genius at this. So
He is.
Marvin's gospel is definitely to be considered.
Absolutely.
But yes, and I would say yes, and I would say that the difference between open rates and reply rates is like in investing, the difference between trade volume in your portfolio and net proceeds at the end of your investment cycle. So in other words, if during the course of your 1 year investment, your portfolio only traded a few times, but you got 10% profit, or your portfolio traded millions of times and you still got 10% profit, all things equal, those are the same. Mm-hmm. Right? It's not like one is better than the other, but right. If you have a higher response rate and a higher, so both, then that means you're getting more eyeballs and you're getting, so there's an argument for both of them, but ultimately what we want is the 10% profit. So
right.
Going back to your take on the take rate. So if you know that you need, let's make the math simple. If you know that in order to make a hire, you need 100 people. Now, I've been tracking this for 28 years, and I've always been my worst critic. So the reason why a lot of the things happen that happened in my career is because I'm continuously testing myself. I just recently had a conversation with Jerry Crispin about this, and he told me, because I've known him for 27 or something years, and he told me candidly, one of the things that he enjoyed the most about me was the fact that I'm always A/B testing. And to me, that comes from not a place of continuous improvement, but a place of doubt that I could be doing better, right? So I'm always testing. So from the very beginning, I've been tracking these numbers. And I can tell you that in my entire history, the average number of leads generated to hires is 142.
Okay.
This is the industrial number. That works across all profiles. However, if you're in some fields, that number might be higher and in others might be lower, but it averages out to about 142. So let's use 100 as a round number.
Okay.
If you know you need 100 candidates, then if you also know that you're going to get 35% response rate, that means that you can't just source 100 candidates because you'll only end up with 35.
Right.
You're going to need to source 290 candidates.
Right.
And here's what I was going with this was, if you source 100 candidates and your recruiter only accepts a certain percentage, you need to work that into the balance as well. Aside from so Do you submit 100 for review and then contact them, or do you contact them and submit the resulting ones for review?
The latter.
So now,
That's where I sit.
right? So you source 290
Hmm.
to get 35 that got, or sorry, to get 100. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
290 to get 100 that went forward, and now only 75 of those pass review. So you still got the number wrong because you needed 100.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how many do you actually need?
That number just keeps climbing.
Well, just this one time, let's do the math,
Yeah.
right? So we needed 290-ish to
Sure.
get to the 100 that we submitted,
Hmm.
but only 75 got accepted. So we still need another 25, which means we still need another quarter of what we originally needed, which is another 50.
Right. Hmm.
So you need about 300-ish and 50, sort of,
Yeah.
source leads to get enough replies to get enough accepted to do the job. And this is where a lot of people in our industry go wrong. Here's what they do. They go out and they go to LinkedIn and they type in 2 keywords, hit enter, and then they take the first candidate and send them an email and wait.
Oh, that's terrible. Don't do that, please.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
Or they find 10 candidates and send them an email and wait. But there's no working the numbers backwards to know if I'm responsible for this hire. Now, if I'm only contributing and I'm not the only responsible party, those numbers are going to be reduced.
Right.
But if it all depends on me, which in many cases when I get brought in, I am it, and I need to get 10 hires, then I know I need to get 3,600 candidates so that whatever 2,000 of them get submitted so that, enough get interviewed. You see what I'm saying?
Yep. Yeah, I absolutely see what you're saying. You
And
have to
this
work
is,
backwards and look
yeah,
at who's investing into this role. I'm fortunate
on
to
2
share.
levels.
Yeah. Uh-huh. I'm fortunate to share these roles with another recruiter that oftentimes is doing some of their own sourcing as
So
well.
you only responsible for half of the work.
Half, yeah, quote unquote half. Yep. But yeah, you're right. If people are sending one message,
Or
that
10 or whatever. But the point
yeah,
is, find a candidate, message them, find a candidate, message them. There's no system to it. And that's where we end up falling behind because
yeah,
it's much harder to catch up rather than what you're suggesting is source your list, make sure the list is big enough to account for response rate and take rate
yep,
to get the end result that you need. But source your list, then start doing everything else because if not, you're going to end up, kind of basically playing catch up the whole time, right?
yeah. Well, think of it like a 2-stage booster rocket.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
they all have their specific functions to get you to the end goal. And so if I source the large number, I'm gonna find those. That's stage 1, and then my outreach is stage 2, and stage 3 is now at that point I'm
They
getting
make
to
it
my
to
goal.
to whatever that next stage is, which may be
Mhm.
apply or interview or phone screen or
Right.
maybe you're phone screening them. But the point is, it's that next stage.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, I was going to come back to one of those. Oh, it just left my head.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
Anyway, I wanted to make sure the folks kind of take away from this. Iterate your search
Mhm.
until you get 70% of the results are clickable.
Mhm.
Then source enough leads so that 30% reply is enough to get to the 70% accept.
Yep.
That's enough to get to the interviews. Kind of do that math backwards.
Mhm.
And that's when you know that you can, that's when you know you can stop. And in my experience, if that's not enough, then I go back and I reset expectations. So in other words, I did the list, I did the reply, and we're at the end of this process and we still didn't get a candidate or something happened. I'll go back and recalibrate my search. I'm not going to go back and do the exact same search or continue where I left off.
Right.
You suggested earlier that you keep a list of second tier candidates, and I think that what you're saying is they weren't a fit for this job, but they might be a fit for another job, so you keep
Potentially.
them.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, they met the general parameters of what I was looking for, right?
Right.
Because they returned in the search. So at some point, I'm going to be able to tap back into that
You
same
could.
pipeline.
Right. Okay. So you're saying waste not, want not.
Yeah.
Don't waste even the candidates that you're on the fence. Still put them in have like an A and a B list, right?
Essentially,
Because you
yeah.
may need to go, yeah, that's smart. I like that. I'm going to add that to my workflow now,
Mhm.
for sure.
Yeah,
So,
I do that with statuses. Other people do it with tags. Other people just do it with separate spreadsheets. But that's the way that I roll with it.
well, we're getting close to the end of the time here,
Yeah,
and I just had to do a dad joke.
go for it.
Okay, knock knock,
Who's there?
or
Are who?
are you gonna let me in or what?
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh man, this has been spectacular fun, and I learned a lot. Thank you so much for taking your time to out of your day to be with our listeners or viewers, whatever
Hmm.
they're listening or viewing. And let me throw your thing back up here for a little bit. Here, connect with Cris on LinkedIn. Although if you search for Cris Aquaman, you'll probably find it. But
Yep,
there it is.
most likely.
Yep. So all of my guests on the show, as you've been watching the show, you know kind of what happens next, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Um, the two questions. Are you ready?
Go for it.
So my first question is, who should be our next guest?
All right. So I've thought a lot about this one. And I see David Marr put something in the chat, and he's going to agree with me on this one. Martell Howard is someone that should be on Shally's Alley. Phenomenal individual. I've
I know
collaborated with
him.
him.
Yep,
Yep, several times. And he is someone that people need to listen to. He's got great ideas. He's brilliant, and is always looking to learn.
for sure. Yeah, I know we chat on LinkedIn. He's in Atlanta, I'm pretty sure.
Hmm. Yep.
All right, so nailed that one. Passed the test. And the other one is, what would you like people to think about over the weekend as they contemplate today?
Yeah, is people think over the weekend. I think there's two things I would want people to think about. Um, First would be if you could have any tool, function, anything that could solve a problem in a TA process or a TA workflow tomorrow, what would that tool look like and what would that be? I think that's how we're going to continue to innovate talent acquisition and figuring out what is missing and what needs to be continually contributed to. I would say the other question or other piece of contemplation for the weekend is think how can I be more intentional about the Boolean that I write for my searches?
Ah,
It's really easy to build ourselves into habits. There are going to be pieces that have to be the same. If you're X-ray searching using the site colon command is going to have to be there. But I think it becomes really easy for us to become creatures of habit and creatures of
just kind of
routine.
stream of
To
consciousness.
yeah,
Yeah,
think about how can I as an individual be more
be
intentional
more
about
intentional.
the searches I build.
Okay, sweet. That is awesome. All right, man. So we are at the end of the show. As I mentioned before, next up, our next guest will be William Uranga. And coming up after that, we're going to skip one because the first one of July is July 5th, which is right after the July 4th holiday. And I'll probably have acid reflux and indigestion from eating too many hot dogs. And you might as well. So
Most
we're gonna
likely.
skip that one. Yeah, I may do a replay on one of my favorite episodes, but we'll see you back here on July 12th with ABQ, Amy Beth Quinn. So stay tuned and have a great weekend. And by all means, please be kind to yourselves. Bye bye.
Bye.